I want to talk to you about a document that was recently put out in Latin America. It's called the Joint Declaration of the First Latin American Conference of Chile, and it happened on December 1st or the 2nd of this year. Now, it should be noted that these individuals are Gonzaloists, and so let that, this is the framework from which they're approaching things. Now, their statement included a lot of things that are outright patently false, things that are outright reactionary, and I do want to take issue with a bunch of them. Now, they're affirming commitment of the Communist Party of Peru's Shining Path and the Communist Party of Chile to Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. Okay, fine, well enough. But it calls out revisionism. It calls out people who support the fascist government of Venezuela. So essentially, they're calling the Venezuelan government fascist, which would lead me to believe that they don't know what fascism is. Fascism is, in one of the most loosely understood sense, when there's a total alliance between capital and the state. Of course, that would describe the opposite of Venezuela. Venezuelan government is at war with capital in the country. Now, by no means can you claim Venezuela socialist. They're social democratic at best because they refuse to take the final step and go into a full revolution. That would be a rightful criticism. But calling Venezuela fascist is simply nonsense. Now, the reason that they do this is because they target people who target purely U.S. imperialism rather than Russian and Chinese imperialism. Now, you can make those criticisms. You can criticize the Chinese for the imperialist actions that they are taking in Africa. And to some degree, you can criticize Russia as well. But I don't see what this has to do with Venezuela. Venezuela is going through its own struggle and seeking out alliances with other countries, not the United States. So you tend to get this idea of where is it that they're getting this idea from? Well, a lot of this has to do with the incorrect political thinking of the Gonzaloists in general. Now, there was an organization called the RIM, of which Bob Avakian was the head. Now, the RIM was what stepped in when essentially China turned to revisionism. And they claimed to uphold Mao's line. They claimed to uphold Maoism. See, but the problem with that is that they sided with the rightists. I mean, anybody who bothers to really look at what Mao's policies were later in his leadership sees that he is very rightist, and this particularly has to do with regards to the three worlds theory, which over and over again, I have to remind people, has nothing to do with third worldism. Essentially, they were saying that allying with the U.S. over the Soviet Union and other states like that, which is reactionary nonsense. It completely is. However, because RIM and the Gonzaloists did this for so long, and they supported the rightist positions in Mao, they kind of, rather than admitting that they were wrong and that Mao was wrong in this regard, they continued to keep the essence of that criticism. That, well, if you cannot just criticize the U.S., you have to criticize other states, even when they're not doing imperialist things. Like, you see where I'm kind of going with this, why they attack people who attack the U.S. for carrying out imperialism inside of Venezuela. I mean, what evidence is there that Russia or China are doing that? I mean, yeah, they're making loans, but keep in mind that these are not socialist states. These are capitalist states. So they are going to make loans. It's the nature of the loan that makes the difference. But you could see why they hold this position, because this comes out of the incorrect three worlds theory kind of orientation. This goes along with a lot of the incorrect line that the Gonzaloists continue to have, because they are incapable of criticizing their incorrect line because it comes from following the incorrect line of Mao. And the point of Gonzaloists is to promote themselves as the real face of Maoism. They're the ones that created Maoism. Therefore, if they criticize Mao, they're criticizing themselves. Well, it's just simply not true that Gonzaloism that Gonzalo created Maoism. This is an absolute lie. In fact, Maoism was created by the theorists Chen Boda and Lin Biao. They were the ones responsible for the creation of Maoism. Now, Lin Biao, being the left side of the Chinese Communist Party, was eventually assassinated by the right, which included Mao and many of the reactionary rightist policies that he did have. But this isn't something that's going to be acknowledged by the Gonzaloists. Instead, they uphold the reactionary era of Mao's policies rather than admitting where Mao made mistakes, because then they would have to admit their own mistakes. Now, they have to do this in order to justify Mao's reactionary stance of simply allying with the rightists rather than doing the right thing and that opposing them. And this largely happened because of the burgeoning criticism of the party was starting to push Mao out of power. And given the policies that he put forth, he should have been pushed out of power because he was giving reactionary rightist nonsense. And it would have been right to kick him out of the party. And this has a lot to do with the very dishonest way that Gonzalo and the Gonzaloists, I mean the people in the country, etc. There is no Gonzaloism. It's literally nothing. Gonzalo made no contribution to theory whatsoever. All he has done is simply parrot things that have been said in the past by theorists, and that somehow this means he created something. I mean, this is complete nonsense. I mean, this parroting of the reactionary Chinese line led to them doing things like assassinating people from the DPRK that were in the country. I mean, that's just one example, was the Gonzaloists who had them killed. Why would you kill people from the DPRK? By attacking the embassy in the country. Why? What good did that do? Because this was the kind of anti-Soviet bad line that Mao had. Obviously, the Soviet Union was revisionist during that time, but that by no means you side with the imperialist United States against the revisionist Soviet Union. But you can see how this leads them into like these really wrong tactics that they're not capable of, really criticizing themselves on. I'm kind of not explaining it entirely clearly, but you understand what I'm saying. Now, there's some other things there, like they argue that there's going to be a world war coming, and that one of the powers, Russia, China, or whatever, is going to essentially replace the United States, and it will lead to the downfall of imperialism. A world war has never led to the downfall of imperialism. Now, a world war has replaced one imperialist power with another. That has certainly happened. That happened coming out of World War I and World War II. But they don't give any indication why it would be different this time, or why it is that it will destroy imperialism in general. Maybe a world war will destroy everybody, and there will be no more imperialism? Maybe that's the angle they're going for. They're not clear about this in their document, which I did link in the description. But it says it will lead to the downfall of imperialism within 50 to 100 years. The problem is that the world doesn't have 50 to 100 years. I mean, even the most optimistic, estimates put the destruction of Earth at like 20 to 30 years. That's like looking on the bright side kind of thing. Now, let me explain something by contrast. In 20 years, the country of Bangladesh will be underwater from flooding. And that's like an optimistic view, 20 years. Others claim it'll happen much earlier. So the world doesn't have 50 to 100 years. So I don't know what the point of making that will be. Maybe they are climate change deniers. I don't know. It would make sense given this kind of position. But I'm not going to speak for them on this situation because I don't know if they... I haven't read anything on them with regards to climate change, so I'm not gonna guess what their position on this is. But I would think that if you did believe in climate change, you would know that the world does not have 50 to 100 years. So I find that very strange. And what is the they don't make very specific what's to be done with that kind of information with the 50 to 100 years. It's very strange. This this kind of, so-called Maoism is very heavily influenced by the American Maoists, which are frankly terrible. Just a god-awful abortion of an ideology, which is essentially, American Maoism is essentially anarchism with a Maoist veneer, would be the best way of describing it. Maoist or not myself, it's very hard to deny that Maoists in the First World are complete ID poll, and that's a rightful criticism of them. And this kind of just generally bad line is reflected in here as well. The main crux of the Gonzaloist position is trying to uphold Mao's incorrect ideas, and then in a roundabout way attributing them to Gonzalo himself, which is not only wholly dishonest, they're incorrect ideas. No, not all of Mao's ideas were incorrect, but in the later years of his life, later years of his leadership, yes, he had many incorrect reactionary ideas. Now, these are just some of the thoughts that I had on this document, which was sent to me by somebody on Twitter. I actually was not aware that it had even been made, but there's a lot wrong here. I mean, this is tied to a lot of the bad theory that came out of RIM and the opportunism that was associated with it. So those are my general thoughts on this document.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.